Story 1. She brought her child to the restaurant without actually telling me she had a child. Then she saw her friend outside, got up, and left me with her child, whom I had never met, and had a 15-minute conversation outside. Story 2. Her apartment looked like it was ransacked by wolves. I'm not even exaggerating. This was a city apartment, so I'm quite sure there were no wolves. Most of the furniture was knocked over. Boxes everywhere. No clear delineation between laundry, food, and garbage. Story 3. She was one of the cutest girls I met online, and we had a nice dinner. Then she asked if I wanted to meet up with her friends for more drinks down the street. I thought that was fine. Seemed like a good sign she wanted to keep hanging out. However, she didn't say another word to me the rest of the night once we met up with them. I just sat and listened to their conversation for an hour, then awkwardly left. Story 4. He talked about how much cocaine he did with his entertainment lawyer friends. He suggested doing some cocaine together. He asked me if I had any. It was a Wednesday lunchtime date. Story 5. A friend of mine told me about a date she went on. It was great. They both liked each other and made plans for a second date. There was lots of chemistry. As they left the restaurant, she slipped on some snow and ice, twisting her ankle. He just laughed at her and walked away. He texted later about the second date, but she ignored him. Story 6. After going out of town for the weekend, I dropped her off at her friend's house, which was an hour away from where I lived at the time. I told her I had to get back home to get ready for work the next day. She was begging me to stay and hang out some more, but I kept saying I had to get home. After about 15 minutes, I went to my car to leave. She hopped onto the hood of my car and refused to get off. After 10 more minutes of trying to talk her down, I gave up, got into my car, locked the doors, tilted the seat back, and acted like I was taking a nap. She sat on my hood for another 20 minutes or so before it started to rain. That's what finally got her off of my car. Fine, go home, see if I care, or something whiny like that, and she stormed off into her friend's house. I never contacted her again. Story 7. We went to a little tea pastry shop. He kept talking about his ex nonstop, showing pictures of her and so on. He forgot his wallet because of his depression. Then, when he realized I was not engaging much in the conversation, he asked me if I had friend-zoned him. No. Then he asked if I wanted to have sex. No thanks. Story 8. Took me to a Mexican restaurant. Got the complimentary chips and salsa. Kept telling the waiter we needed more time. Once we ate all the chips and salsa, he decided it was time to leave. Dude just wanted free chips and salsa. Story 9. I have a very common last name. She had the same last name. The date went well, but she said she couldn't go out with me on a second date because it felt too weird. She explained that both her father and her brother also have the same first name as me. So all three of us have the exact same first and last name. I was like, whoa, yeah, that would be weird for me too. And we actually ended up staying pretty good friends after. Story 10. I took out a girl whom I had known for about a dozen years and had a crush on for the first few years when we met in our early 20s. We reconnected after not having seen each other in a while. Felt like something was there, so I asked her out. We planned a late morning hike with our dogs, then lunch. I got there, and she wasn't ready because she was badly hungover. I waited for over an hour while she got ready. She brought a flask of whiskey on the hike. At lunch, we visited a dog-friendly bar patio. She ordered multiple drinks. Our waitress pulled me aside to tell me she's intentionally not coming by the table so the date couldn't order more. She made quick friends with another table and got them to buy her a couple of shots. On the drive home, she asked me to stop by the liquor store. I refused, and she told me if I didn't, she would drive to one after I dropped her off, so I stopped by the store to prevent her from hurting someone. I dropped her off, and she asked if I wanted to come in and hang out. I said no and drove off. 2 weeks later, when she contacted me, I told her I wasn't interested. That was also the end of our friendship. Story 11. While we were chatting online and over the phone, she mentioned multiple times how she hates lies and that she would never forgive a liar. She made such a big deal about this that I thought, wow, She probably had some really bad experience with liars before because she mentions this a lot. On our first date, she confessed that she lied about her age. Story 12. She ordered an obnoxious amount of expensive food while I barely ate one order. She then passed me the bill thinking I'm dumb. I flagged the waiter and asked them to rewrite the order as separate bills. Paid for mine and left her there. Story 13. Her ex just happened to be walking outside the restaurant we were at, and she invited him in to sit at our table and have dinner with us. I protested, but I had to go to the bathroom and the food was arriving. When I came back, the food, date, and date's ex had all disappeared. The time between this guy sitting at our table, the food arriving, and me coming back from the bathroom was less than 5 minutes. Story 14. He forgot to take off his wedding ring, which meant he had to admit his divorce was actually him sleeping on the couch while he and his wife went to therapy. Story 15. He chewed with his mouth open and talked with a mouthful of food. He chugged his beer and then asked if I was going to finish mine. It was half full and I planned on finishing it. I was so grossed out that I let him finish mine so the date would end quicker. Story 16. We sat down for a few drinks and food at a beer garden. She immediately proceeded to tell me how much men love her. Men want to be with her. Men are obsessed with her. And that I should be lucky I am getting this time with her. She is very high maintenance. Then a group of her friends showed up shortly after to tell me essentially the same thing as they went to sit at a table about 5 feet away. It was so strange. I still do not know if that was supposed to influence me into being obsessed with her or something, but it set off enough alarms. This was also before any drinks were involved. Story 17. Told me he initially approached me because I looked submissive, then said he was able to clean up after himself but didn't want her anymore. Also, complained about previous dates. Story 18. I told him beforehand that I have severe food allergies and therefore I do not eat in restaurants much. I was open to any other activity, but a first date is a bad time to try out a new restaurant if you are allergic to living. For some reason, he deeply resented this and spent the whole date making passive-aggressive jokes about how people with food allergies are not great and probably should not be alive. Story 19. I made her dinner and drinks. She proceeded to have too many, apparently 2 is too many for her, and got belligerently drunk. She then started speaking aggressively and claimed I was trying to take advantage of her. Full stop, time to end this. I offered to buy her a ride-share home, but she claimed that would divulge her address. I then offered to send her funds to cover the trip to keep her identity safe, both there and back in the morning. She then pushed me and screamed that I was keeping her there against her will, but I wasn't in her way. She could leave at any time. I shut up and went into another room until she drove away. She then texted me in the morning asking when I was going to pick her up to get her car. Apparently, all of this was my fault in her head. Story 20. I got followed after leaving the meetup place for about 6 blocks until I decided to pull into a Target and just hang out there for a while until I was sure he was gone. It was definitely the scariest experience I've ever had. Story 21. We were at a restaurant that he visits a lot, so he knew the workers well and was friendly with the bartender who seemed interested in him. Halfway through the date, after talking to the bartender a few times, he flat out asks her on a date in front of me. She was a little confused since he was there with me but said yes. I was sitting there like, okay, this is awkward. And before she left to go take care of other customers, he says, I'm just messing with you, you're definitely not my type. And she looked so sad and upset. She was such a sweet and gorgeous Latina girl, so that was super confusing. When she walked away, he was like, I only like white girls like you. I would never be attracted to someone like her. He is half Mexican too, so what? Not sure if he was trying to prove to me other girls are into him or just messing with someone to mess with them, but I hated it so much. I told him that was so rude, and he knew I was so upset with him for hurting this girl's feelings. Honestly, he wouldn't have gotten a second date after asking another girl out in front of me anyway. But add on the immediate rejection of the girl to mess with or embarrass her, and then the racism, and it was the fastest turnaround against a guy for me that I've ever had on a date before. Story 22. We were eating dinner at a mall restaurant, maybe Hard Rock Cafe. Her treat. We were making small talk, and she said something blatantly racist. I said something about how I don't think that way, and she pointed to a table nearby and said, I suppose you think that is cute? In reference to a nearby black couple's baby. I finished my free food and never saw her again. Story 23. I'm going to purposefully keep this vague. He was my type, rather sweet at first and in messages. Then we had a video date due to COVID-19, and I was out of state for a bit. He just complained about women the whole time and told me, "Oh, but I don't mean you," after saying the most vicious things in the world about women online or in his life. Also, he was super judgmental about everything I was doing while we were on the call, how I cooked things, an experiment for class I had going on the back counter that he didn't like the look of, what I was wearing as it didn't seem feminine, etc. His overall vibe felt unsafe and rather unstable. I'm kind of glad he stopped talking to me because I felt like if I had blocked him or anything, he'd have come to the school or something. Story 24. She was absolutely horrible to the waitstaff, just a straight-up dismissive, entitled woman to the poor girl who had to serve us. I powered through the meal, left that girl a 75% tip for the trouble, and never called that woman again. Story 25. Back when I was dating, it almost always boiled down to the same thing. They were happy to talk about themselves but didn't know how to talk about anything else. You could be Aphrodite in the flesh, but I'm not going on a second date if you don't know how to hold a conversation. Story 26. Tinder date bragged about knowing everything about me. My Tinder profile only had my first name, my university, and some stupid phrase. That's it. Apparently, he had gone to one of my university's pages and searched everyone with my fairly common first name, then found my Facebook profile that way. He figured out my last name, and from there he found the few public posts I had and also found my Instagram. I'm all for researching someone before you go out with them, but bragging to me that he knows my mother's name and how many siblings I have and what kind of dog I have? You can bet I fixed my privacy settings right after getting home from that date. Story 27. Matched with a girl online and we chatted for about 2 days. She asked me if I wanted to go on a 1-hour out-of-town trip with her for our first meet, and I declined and said, "How about we get dinner first?" She said okay and asked me to pick her up. Didn't think anything of it. Dinner day came and I picked her up. She told me she was bringing her camera, which was a big professional-style camera. On the drive out there, she told me that she brought her Care Bears to take photos with the food. I said, "Care Bears?" Sure enough, she pulled out small little Care Bears from her purse. And I was like, "Oh, okay." During the drive, she kicked off her shoes and sat cross-legged in the passenger seat with no socks. And I was like, "Okay." I told her before we got to the restaurant that I was on a diet eating less than 1,200 calories, and my meal portions were usually small. This girl was insanely skinny. She told me that the restaurant we were going to was really good and that we should split whatever we get so we can try a little bit of everything. And I said, "Okay." She proceeded to order like 3 appetizers, 3 entrees, and dessert. When they brought the food out, she told me to hold on while she took photos from virtually every angle with her big camera and the Care Bears next to the food. I was like, "What the hell?" So after about 5 minutes of her taking photos, she started handing me a plate one at a time and said we could start eating. I made a dent in one of my plates, where she proceeded to inhale everything else. And I was like, "Bro." They finally brought the bill, and it was just over $300, and I was like, "Oh, okay, let's go Dutch." And she was like, "Oh, I didn't realize, I didn't bring." I started to internally scream like Homer, and I said, "I got this." Gave my credit card and we left. Never talked to her again. Thankfully, my best friends all pitched in to help pay that off. Story 28. He complained about how it was so stupid that people collect baseball cards in their original packaging and how if it were him, he would just rip them open and enjoy them. I immediately got the vibe I couldn't take him back to my place with my extensive mint in box vintage collectibles. Story 29. Went on a date with someone who was about 100 pounds heavier than her picture looked. She berated the waitstaff over minor things and didn't leave them a tip. Then, she had the audacity to say that I wasn't a good match for her, which was just fine with me, honestly. Went back the second day to make sure the waiter got $20 because she was stiffed the night before. Story 30. Beautiful Southeast Asian woman begins to pursue me on OkCupid about 10 years ago. We're messaging, we exchange numbers, and she sets a date. I'm half expecting to be catfished, but she shows up for our coffee and a walk. She looks like her picture, speaks perfect English, and we have a cute little early afternoon walkabout. She's into me, seems to think I'm funny, and is really interested in whatever boring engineering school classes I'm telling her about. She tells me she's in school and that she's a dancer. I take this to mean she's a dance major. We end up back at my apartment, and things go unexpectedly far when we fool around. She's good. Only woman I've met in my life who could get me anywhere with a hand job. The date is going so well. She asks if she can stick around and take me to dinner. She wants to pay. At this point, I'm enamored but confused. This girl is solidly out of my league and seems to also have more money than me. We go to dinner and the picture starts to clarify. Dancer meant stripper. It is revealed she has a baby and is only 8 months postpartum. There's a violent X in the picture. In the moment, none of this is a deal breaker. I'm a lonely, broke 21-year-old engineering student, and a beautiful woman is actively courting me. Then the drinks come. She is rapidly trashed. I'm drinking half as much and I'm quite drunk. She starts telling me how I'm going to turn her life around for her. That I'm going to meet her mother tomorrow and show her family that she met a nice man who can earn. That I'm going to be a good example for her son. That I could totally kick her ex's ass. Then the babysitter calls. Apparently, she has to go home right now and gets belligerent when I try to order her a cab. She physically wrestles with me to try and drive her car while nearly blackout, and finally, I make the decision to drunk drive her home in her vehicle so she doesn't crash into a pole. She's all over me while I'm trying to sober up enough to leave because I don't have $20 for a cab home. I did not meet up with her family the next day. I was really mad about feeling manipulated into driving drunk and realized that no matter how hot she was, nothing was worth having a hurricane like her in my life.